You are in the light recap session, so we are going to look at our fall 2023 finalists, and the theme of that open call was cancer. So we're going to discuss with them today, celebrate them, and also talk about some new things that are coming up. So we'll go ahead and get started. My name's Alexis Engelhardt. I'm the project manager of Light. I'm super happy to be here with you today. Thank you so much for showing up. And like I said, we're going to celebrate the finalists selected from our fall 2023 Cancer Open Call. So our fall 2023 Cancer Open Call, we ran it from August 1st through November 1st. It was our fourth call that we ran since launching the activities of Light. So we launched all of our activities back in the spring of 2022. So this was our fourth call. It specifically asked, how might we reimagine healing and transformation with cancer through art, letters, stories, and poetry? So we know that creativity can be used to reimagine healing and transformation through experiences. And we know these experiences with cancer, we can use creativity as well. So a member of our team lost a family member to cervical cancer, and this kind of sparked our interest in this open call. She turned to poetry. She really looked up to Audre Lorde and Lucille Clifton. Audre Lorde described her experience with coping with cancer as an opportunity to transform silence into language and action. And then Lucille Clifton also described cancer as the dreaded word that leaves you staring at life with your own living eyes. So we really wanted to hear from the public. We wanted to hear from folks who have experienced cancer themselves, but also those who've experienced cancer through maybe a father, a mother, a brother, sister, uncle, aunt, grandparent, even a friend or a stranger, just someone they know. We're looking for folks to submit entries on cancer if they were living with it, but also if these folks had passed away with it too. We're looking for submissions for those who were coping from cancer as well. So those who are coping with cancer as a loved one or a friend, or even one who had lost someone, or as a caregiver. So through art, letters, stories, and poetry, all of the submissions that we received were walking a similar path or in similar shoes, but we know that they're not alone, and we can begin the process of healing and transformation. And in this session today, we are going to talk about that. At the end of our open call, we collected all of the submissions, and the submissions were scored based on our judging criteria. So they were scored on innovation, clarity of expression, originality and creativity in expression, appeal of content, and relevance to public health. We awarded 3 prizes to the first, second, third places of each category. So we had 3 finalists in art, letters, stories, and poetry. Okay, and we will look at our finalists. So we had art was our first category. The specific prize for art we call Arts for Public Health Prize. And we had 3rd place, Mezoma Okeki. She won 3rd place in our art category. Israel Olugbodi won 2nd place in our art category. And for our 1st place, we actually had a finalist, but he ended up being disqualified. So that's why we had no 1st place for this specific category. For the letters, Natalie Reed won 3rd place in our letters category. Adedolapo Ajayi won 2nd place in our letters, and Bashiruddin Opeyemi won 1st place. And our letters prize is called Dear Public Health Prize. On to poetry. We call this one Poetry is Not a Luxury Prize from Audre Lorde. Clay Matthews won the 3rd place prize in poetry. Caroline Johnson won 2nd place prize in poetry. And Joel Shabazinski won 1st place. And then finally, our stories category. This is our last category we have. It's called the Penn 3 Prize in Storytelling. That's the specific prize for storytelling. Valerie Gibbons won 3rd place. Abdullah Salam Kawushitu won 2nd place. And Sai Furukawa won 1st place in our stories category. So we announced these finalists last fall, but we wanted to spend some time here today to congratulate them. So congratulations to all of our fall 2023 cancer finalists. Okay, and at this moment, we're going to invite the finalists from our open call to kind of share a little bit more about their submission, their experience with submitting, but also their experience with cancer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. Okay. So a few of our finalists are on here today. I know I spoke to you guys earlier. I'm just going to ask a couple questions and feel free to raise your hand or I will call on you as well, but we'd love to hear from folks. So the first question is, tell us a little about your submission and why it relates to reimagining healing and transformation with cancer. So why specifically did you choose this medium and what motivated you to submit? I know Joel's on here. Joel, would you like to share?
Certainly. Can you hear me,
Yeah.
Alexis? Okay, fine. One of the reasons I chose to respond to the call for submissions was that I'm an anthropologist, and I've spent much of my career writing in kind of academic or scholarly language. But when a number of years ago, my youngest son had cancer, I started to explore using language itself to express what was going on in my life, but also in the lives of the people I was meeting in the medical facilities where he was being treated. And so poetry gave me an opportunity to speak not only in a different kind of voice, but to get past some of the kinds of traditional scholarly narratives that usually surround cancer or any kind of medical challenge that people have. I have found it liberating. I think it's profound, it's enriching, and the very act of writing poetry can also be a kind of a healing journey for the writer as well. So those were some of the things that led me to try to put into poetry the submission that I offered and that you gratifyingly accepted. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Joel. We're excited to see your submission in our magazine. Let's see who else. Valerie, would you like to share a little bit about your submission and maybe why you submitted to our call and what your submission was?
Well, my submission relates the story of 2 patients sharing their experiences, hopes, fears, and shaky attempts to move forward, while also living under some condemnation. And the 2 patients, one was me, and the other, another blood cancer patient. Both of us with very complicated forms of leukemia. So the condemnation, what for her being almost a death sentence, as she just tried with various doctors, everything to try to stall or treat her aggressive form. And also she was under the weight of condemnation for living with her loving, caregiving boyfriend instead of being married to him. And for whatever reasons, that was the situation. There was condemnation from family, and the same thing had happened to me, that I was with a loving caregiver. But people had their moral or religious or just punitive attitudes about what it means to be in a loving or in a relationship. So I was in the position of volunteering at a cancer resource center when she came in and asked to speak to somebody else who had been through a blood and marrow transplant, because it was her one and only chance to live. So it relates the story of our conversation at a table, extending compassion to each other and humor, and being truthful about our experiences and what is helpful and not helpful for people, for someone like us going through what we were. So the submission reimagines healing and transformation through just a sharing of nobody else gets it, but we get each other. And she did pass away at the age of 30. And she had been fighting with the healthcare system. She had collections on her back. She had lack of familial support, all in her 20s. And then ultimately 10 years of this, and she did die. And afterwards, she came to me and I heard what I thought were tinkling sounds going across the room when she had just passed, because her boyfriend called me to say she's gone. But it was the sound of, I realized, chains rattling, like chains falling away. And I said, oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you for coming and telling me you're free now. You're free. So it was a experience that stayed with me. And it was, knowing her was so profound that I just wrote notes of that encounter with her, so that when I went to write it, which has been now years later, it was very fresh in my mind still, and I could tell the story as if it happened yesterday. And that's why it's called Unchained.
I love that, Valerie. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, I know we have a few more. Natalie, are you able to unmute and tell us a little bit about your submission? I know she was having difficulty, so I don't know if she's able to. What about Bashiruddin? Would you like to share a little bit about your submission, why you submitted it and what it means to you? That's okay if you don't want to share. Okay, let's look at another question. So why do you think creativity matters in the public health space, especially in, the medical field or, the public health space? And thinking about your submission, creativity, and writing about your experience with cancer, why do you think that's important for folks? Yeah, Jill, go ahead.
Yeah. I think those of us who either have had family members or someone close to us, dealing with cancer, or who have been in some kind of a professional role that gives us access to that particular experience. That's a kind of privilege that we have. And I think with that privilege of whatever knowledge or insights we gain, there comes a kind of a responsibility to see if there are effective, meaningful ways of communicating that to other people. So for myself, as both a father of someone who had cancer and as an anthropologist who's worked in medical settings, I feel a kind of a responsibility to share those experiences with people who either may not have access to that, or people who are on the inside of those experiences but may lack the skill, the opportunity, the encouragement, the language, whatever means are not available to them, that those of us who are part of their lives for at least a while have a kind of a responsibility to try to, articulate their stories. I'll add one other just thought really, really quickly, because this is part of what prompted me to write the poem I did, which is not about my son, but about a young man and his family I got to know in one of the facilities where he was being treated, which is, I think, all of us are to some extent inundated with what I call recovery narratives that are out there in the world, in bookstores and on television talk shows. And these are often people who are prominent public figures. They're musicians, they're artists, they're athletes. They all seem to have what I will call a recovery story. So they write these endless, repetitive books about their experiences that give us a very, very narrow view of what recovery is really all about. And I think most of those books and the people who appear on talk shows have nice, neat little stories that usually have some kind of a happy ending. And it ignores the whole range of experiences out there that I think people who are really on, say, the inside of cancer, have to deal with. So I think those of us who have the means and the opportunity to try to convey some of those stories and let people know that in stories that don't have the nice kind of happy hallmark ending meant for television, there's integrity, there's bravery, there's dignity, and sure, in many cases there, of course, is death. But we can tell all those stories without the melodrama and without the hype, and it makes it a lot more meaningful. And that's part of what prompted me to try to tell the story of the young man I write about in my poem. It's called The Coloring Book. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. And you're right. I think bringing creativity and it really helps connect the audience, and it's easier to understand and more meaningful to everyone as well. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good way to tell a story through a story itself, a letter, a poem, or even a piece of art. Thank you, Joel.
You're welcome.
Valerie, did you want to tag on that? And also think about what you hope to achieve or communicate through your work being selected for this opportunity?
Could you restate what you're asking me to comment on?
Yeah, so what do you hope to achieve or communicate through your work being selected for this opportunity to publish in the Light magazine?
To tell it like it is. And just to piggyback on Joel's comments, yeah, the media loves the happy endings trope. And it's kind of a use of cancer patients. There was a time when nobody said the C word back in my grandmother's day. It was something you hid. And then thankfully, you know, like mental illness is starting to become enlightened. There's more enlightenment now about mental illness. Cancer is no longer forbidden, but it's almost like, you know, the celebrity cancer thing. It's become a use to tell drama stories, and our culture is afraid of death. It does not, you know, separates out sick people, separates out older people, and but then there's this kind of double standard of admiring but not touching. It's not going to happen to me, and so I'm just I just feel like the purpose and some of the other writings I've done is to just be real, speak for myself and for others I've known who don't have a voice anymore, to say, here's how it really is, and thanks, but you know, we'll tell our own stories. And this is a great thing you're doing, because it does provide that space and that welcome to do it. I guess that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Valerie. I really appreciate your words. Hi, Natalie. I see you now.
I finally figured out how to do it after my Zoom upgraded on me. But here I am.
Now you have the newest version. Did you want to share a little bit about your submission and maybe what inspired you to submit?
Yes, thank you. And I have to say, I'm getting over a nasty virus with a nagging cough, so I hope it doesn't come up, but it does. It might. What inspired my letter to a friend was a piece I had written 24 years ago when I was going through everything. And I'd written it for an anthology that, like many anthologies, never materialized. And so when I saw this opportunity, I said, well, can I take a 4,000-word piece and distill it into its 500-word essence? And the reason I chose to write it as a letter is, to me, when you write in the second person, you write to the reader directly, the information gets right to the reader's heart instantly. And there were two reasons I wanted to write this piece. The first is to make people understand that somebody suffering from cancer or any huge transformational event is actually a refugee from their lives. They are. They're no longer in life the way other people are in life. And they need to understand that they are refugees, and the people around them need to understand that they were refugees. So that was the first reason. The second is that I learned through the 9-month process with the 2 cancers and everything else going on, that one can live a fear-based life or a joy-based life, and it's an either-or proposition. You can't say, well, I do a bit of both. If you say, well, you know, I know joy, I'm happy sometimes, that's a fear-based life with a little bit of happiness in it. And I made the decision, going through all the treatment, the surgery, everything, that whether I lived or died, I wanted to figure out how to stop living a fear-based life and to start living a joy-based life. And I developed techniques for it. I worked with it. And I actually developed a workshop, a weekend workshop, helping other people do it, because one of the cancers I had was ovarian, and most women, or many women with ovarian cancer, don't survive, and I was allowed to live. And that meant that I had to make my life meaningful, because why else was I allowed to live? So that's it.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you so much for sharing. And then I'm going to read a chat really quick from Bashir Adine, who is also a finalist. He said the motivation for my submission was based on an experience interning in the hospital. So he made a friend with a patient who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and he saw how strong she was during the process of chemo, and he was motivated to write about it. Thank you so much, everyone. We will close with one final question before I wrap up the session. So what is, from your perspective, what do you all think is the best way to encourage others to use creativity to disseminate and share information and their stories concerning cancer or other public health issues and topics? So what do you think is the best way to encourage folks to share their stories? Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
I think you have to have something very specific to offer. In other words, if you speak about creativity in general, that's very nice. It's a concept. Concepts don't get you anywhere. I'm a pragmatist. I think that way. So, for example, I have a series of exercises I developed. I can show people how this works, why it works. You have to have something substantive, and you have to have enough stories and enough personal stories out there, because I don't think people heal without some kind of creativity. You have to believe in something, and you have to become creative in how you deal with what you believe. If you're going to have the strength, the courage, the endorphins, the whatever it is to possibly survive or to change and transform radically and meaningfully before you die. So I think that one has to have a workshop, a strategy, a series of exercises, something very specific to offer people, and then they will believe it.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, Joel, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute still.
Okay. It may seem overly simple or trite, but I think the very act of listening is an encouragement for people to think of ways in which they can, find a medium, a means to express what's going on. And when I say listen, I would almost say you have to listen, and then you have to listen again, and then you have to listen again. What I have found in my experience, both personally and professionally, is that when people tell a story and then they tell it a second time, and then they tell it a third time, the story keeps changing. None of us ever tell the same story exactly the same way, a second or third or a 20th time. So if what you're really interested in is both hearing people's stories and giving them a chance to tell those stories, I don't think it's sufficient ever to sit down with them, say once, and say, hey, tell me what's going on. Tell me, how things are for you. And then go away thinking, oh, I've heard their story. No, you've heard maybe chapter 1, you've heard edition 1. And if you want to do justice, to their stories, you have to listen repeatedly. And I think for the person telling the story, not just listening to it, each new iteration of that story is itself, if you will, a kind of a creative act. Because each time they retell a story, they're looking for new ways of understanding it. They're finding new meaning in the act of telling and retelling the story. So that itself is a form of creativity, but it only happens if someone is willing to sit there and listen to them. And in medical facilities and sometimes in our personal lives, people can be really very perfunctory in their role as listeners. They ask questions, but they don't want to hear the answers, or they want you to be really brief, and then they want to move on. And when cancer is at the heart of what is happening, people don't know what to say. A lot of the time, they don't know what to ask. They don't know how to respond. And to the extent you can find the wherewithal to really listen and listen and listen, you give people the creative opportunity to really tell their stories in a way that's meaningful to them. So thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you so much. Valerie, did you want to share any final thoughts, or did any other finalists want to share any final thoughts or insights?
From 2017 to 2022, I had founded and ran a nonprofit to promote the arts for healing and therapeutic humor. And it began to give back to other cancer patients, and then expanded to other, partnering with other social service organizations. I think that boots on the ground kind of thing is important in our locales where we are. My next, and I'm feeling encouraged hearing from people here, is to start local or Zoom writing groups and maybe some of the art. I self-taught how to write and tell stories. I'm feeling motivated to start So yeah, the practical, let's do it. Let's meet up. Let's express. It's expressive art. It's expressive writing is what it is. Let's just express. We get each other.
Thank you so much, Natalie. All right, I think my connection is bad. I'm not sure if you guys can hear
No, I'm
me.
never. That allow people to find their way through getting out of themselves and then returning to themselves. And that's what I offer. And that's all I know. Thank you.
Sorry, I got kicked
Hello?
out for a second. Sorry, Natalie.
No, that
Okay.
was it. I just think that there are tools. I mean, I spent a lot of time during the chemo and the radiation and everything else trying to develop and think of ways of helping people do what I did and reform my life. And in the end, I actually moved to a city where I only knew 2 people who were very busy, didn't have time for me, to see if the change I felt within me was real, because how they would respond to me would tell me whether I was this emergent, joy-based person or whether I wasn't. And so I went to a strange place to do it, and I've been here ever since. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Valerie, Natalie, Joel, Bashiruddin, and all of the other finalists who submitted to our open call, and also those who are here with us today. Thank you so much for sharing your story and about your submission. We really, really appreciate it, and we're excited to see your work in our magazine. Before we close out, I'm going to very quickly share my screen again. Make sure that this is showing up correctly. But we are releasing issue 2 of the Light magazine, and this one is on mental health and wellness. So I'm just going to show you a little snippet, like sneak peek of what this will look like. So here are some photos that just show some of the submissions and some of the artwork that is in this magazine. You are able to purchase this on our website. So this is released today.
Mm.
And then we also are launching our Light Journal. So this is something new that we created. This is more of an interactive journal. So everyone can purchase this and then you can write in it. Little self-help and just things that you can navigate in there and kind of help you personally grow. So here are some snippets of this as well. Both of these are available in print, and then they're also available digitally. And then our 3rd issue, which is the cancer issue, will include all of the submissions from those who spoke today. That issue will be released this fall. So we will have that issue available this fall. We're so excited to see all of your submissions in the issue, and we'll keep you updated with its release. Thank you all for joining in this session today. Be sure to, I'll have to end this one, but be sure to join the next session. The next session is a workshop with Emily Rubin, and she actually runs cancer workshops in New York. So definitely join in that one. She's doing a storytelling workshop today. It's not cancer specific, but that's what she usually does in New York. So yeah, thank you for joining, and I'll see you in the next session.